Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Everything Bagel. I'm Alex Kehaya, and I'm the host of the Index podcast, which is our sort of top level show here. This is episode number 2. And before we start, I just want to ask a question. Have you ever thought about how many frontier models could exist if open source AI was monetizable? This is the core problem that Bagel solves. And Bidhan Roy, who's here, is my co-founder. We introduced him on the last episode, is creating that monetizable open source AI, this way to monetize open source AI. And we're going to talk a little bit about some groundbreaking research that the Bagel team did that they wrote a blog article about recently. But before we do that, I just want to double tap Bidhan on this idea of monetizable open source AI. Let's just, like, for people who maybe missed the first episode, talk about what the core problem is and how Bagel solves that problem.
Happy to. Thanks for the intro, Alex. As Alex mentioned, my name is Bidhan, founder of Bagel, and we're making open source AI monetizable. Why? Because open source AI is a massive movement where a lot of open source developers want to work together and contribute to a shared problem or project and make it really good. And potentially those are artificial intelligence models, which are really good in performance, even better than the frontier models that are developed by closed AI labs. But that hasn't happened yet because these open source developers usually lack resources, and AI is a very resource-intensive endeavor, where if you want to build AI, you have to burn money at the end of the day. So open source developers don't have the resource to be able to do that. And that's why they're kind of lagging behind. And all the big innovations are coming from the closed AI labs who are burning hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, even in open source, the best models come from labs like Meta, OpenAI, Google, etc. They don't come from the open source community itself. And that's what we want to change. And one of the most significant ways to accelerate that process is making open source AI monetizable, where open source developers can contribute their contribution to an open source model, and they get a portion of the revenue back when that is generated by that model. And that way they get more resources, they can make even better contributions, and the flywheel of growth continues. And instead of it, we will have models which are built by the open source community, which are 100 times better than the ones that are built by the closed AI labs.
So I'm a huge believer in this. I love open source software. And I think I just want to paint a picture for people really quickly too, like what the open source software community is, right? It started back in the 80s. Actually, my partner, Brian Fox, is one of the people who helped start the open source movement. He wrote this piece of software called the Bash shell, which literally runs on billions of devices and even powers the quadcopter on Mars. And that Bash, along with many other tools that folks like Brian built back then, and Linux, right? Like Linux is in every enterprise machine on the planet. It runs everywhere, and it created trillions of dollars in value. These ecosystems that were born around open source software, they couldn't have seen that coming. Like, these guys that were building this, they were just scratching their own itch. They were trying to solve a problem for themselves. And so they're like, oh, we need a scripting language. I'll make Bash. Born against shell, I think, is what that stands for. And so the challenge with open source AI, though, is that the cost of developing this is so high, right? Like, you need a lot of hardware, for example, a lot of compute. And it's not like you can just like write a piece of software. You write a piece of software and then you have to train that piece of software, the model, in order to make it useful to people. And I guess, like, I just wanted to make that point, but I wanted to paint a picture of like how big this could get if you solve the economic problem, because we can't see how big it will get, but we know from the past that open source software is the purest form of innovation, and it creates massive network effects. And so that's why I get so excited about this opportunity, because those network effects are not possible yet unless you figure out how to create this economy around it. And that's what Bagel's doing. And I wanted to make it define for me just really quickly for people who might not know, what is a frontier AI model? What does that mean when we talk about frontier models? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, happy to. That was a very good summary as well of the opportunity and kind of exploration that we're doing in not just taking software forward, not just taking AI forward, but in taking the civilization forward, the whole civilization, how it's going to work and how it's going to evolve going forward. So, but I loved the summary that you did, Alex. And going back to the question, what are frontier models? Frontier models are the models which are the best models that exist on this planet at the moment. So what would be a frontier model right now? It would be the Claude models from Anthropic, or it would be the O1 models from OpenAI. So these are the best performing models. Like these are AI models which can outperform any other AI models and most human, practically, on any kind of task. It can be like mathematical task, it can be like computation task, it can be like reasoning task and anything like that. So those are frontier models. I would just like to tie this back to previously what I was saying, is that all the frontier models that we have today, like which are the best in class, are closed source, are built by the closed ecosystems. And there are some open source models which are close to that, but even those open source models are built by the closed companies. So all the frontier models are exclusively built by these AI labs who has practically billions of dollars to burn to make these models. And we as an open source community are kind of asking for their gift to keep open sourcing these massive models, which they burnt a lot of money to build for.
Yep. And we talked a lot about how the economic model of Bagel works on the last episode. So I just wanted to double tap on monetizable open source AI, and you're basically going to hear that on every single episode of this show. But also things you're going to learn about in the show is like the cutting edge research coming out of Bagel and out of the AI community more broadly. We'll have other people on that are like leading AI researchers in time as the show grows. But yeah, Bagel is one of those leaders, and you guys are contributing open source research, new innovations back to the community that will outlive your company. Even if you fail in your mission of making monetizable open source AI possible, you've already had a huge impact. And that is one of the things for me about open source that gets me out of the bed in the morning. Like my why for ABK Labs is just build together open source software as the purest form of innovation is about legacy. It's not about money. It's not about building a huge business or anything like that. That's a side effect of doing, like, executing really well. But the legacy is the thing that's important to me. And that was really an inspiration to my partner, Brian, who made Bash. Like, do you think when he wrote that he could have ever imagined the quadcopter on Mars would use fucking Bash as the way that NASA sends it instructions, like JPL Labs, like JPL sends it instructions via Bash, right? Like that's how they dealt where to go and stuff. That's crazy. And that's the power of open source, though. It will go so much farther than you ever could imagine. And so that's what I love about what you guys are doing. Like all the work, blood, sweat, and tears you're putting into your company is going to have a long lasting impact no matter what. Like I'm a full believer in that. And I want to talk about this article now because that is like, we've already seen it happening with this article, like it getting used in places. We can talk about that. But the article is called the inference interference, how to design verifiable inference that's not slow. So can you break it down for me, like high level TLDR? What is the key concept of this? Like, what's the problem and solution? What is the key concept of this article?
Yeah, I'm happy to. But I'd like to touch upon your previous point really quickly.
Sure.
About generating value in open source, which kind of outlasts whatever you do, right? Something I believe, and I believe I actually read this at some book, which I don't remember the name of. But one of the really sustainable ways to kind of make wealth, right? Create wealth is generate value, like real value. And how the world works is that you create a lot of value. a lot of value for a lot of people. And you usually capture a very small percentage of the value that you create, which transforms into wealth, right? Or money or whatever. So this is how it generally works. And that's okay, because that's how it works for everyone. Like, look at like whoever, like people who are wealthy. Elon Musk, he's like extremely wealthy, but he generated a lot of value before that. Like he's the richest person in the world, but he created 10,000 times more value than the money he has, right? And any other form of capturing value which are more efficient, where kind of you create some value and you're capturing like almost as much of it, tends to be not ethical. There are like lots of ways. Like we kind of see sometimes the examples in the blockchain industry, right? So what I believe is that the former way is the better way. Like you create a lot of value and you'll capture a little bit of it, but you create a lot of value for humanity, for the society, or for the industry that you're working in. And that's how you want to go about it as well in whatever we're building at Bagel. So now that's clear. I wanted to just clear that up. Like it was kind of related to the point you made earlier. And I want to talk about the research that we shared about verifiable inference. So verifiable inference, what is it? It's basically you kind of verify what kind of model, AI model is generating the output, which is called the inference for you, right? This is very important in decentralized networks because on a decentralized network, the model can be owned by someone else and you're getting the output from the other person who you don't know, who is probably not even in the same country as you, who is probably like thousands of miles away from where you are. So we have to establish a framework where we kind of figure out where we can verify what kind of model they're using to generate the output. That's one use case. There's another use case where, let's say if it's a decentralized network and you want the other person to improve the model that you have and send you back the results, right? Then you kind of send them your model and they kind of improved and send it back to you. But how do you verify they actually improved your model before you pay them, right? But then they can prove it by sending the result back to you, but then they're not guaranteed to get the payment because you already got the improved model. So you're not going to pay them probably. I mean, if you're a malicious person, right? So there has to be a trust set up between the two parties where the other person who improved the model can prove that they improved your model. And then you make the payment, then you kind of send it back. So that's where the use case of verifiable inference comes in. And there are lots of ways to do so. A lot of people were like, yeah, we can use zero knowledge proofs to do verifiable inference, blah, blah, blah. But that happens to be really slow. And I'm not going to go into the details how slow that is and how costly, expensive that is, but it's not practical. So this is a problem we have been thinking about for a long time. And when we were researching this, we kind of thought like, hey, like we are a bunch of people who spend a lot of time, like I'm talking about my team at Bagel, who spend a lot of time in traditional AI and machine learning. We have used a lot of things in that, a lot of technologies. Like, why don't you bring some of that and kind of apply them in the decentralized AI network that we are trying to build? So that's where the idea of using fingerprinting and watermarking come from. And where it originated is because from my background, I used to be the machine learning lead at Amazon, at a team at Amazon Alexa. And what we did there is we used these fingerprinting and watermarking technologies to verify the model updates on some of the devices. And we were managing the devices of like hundreds of millions of devices around the world. And this technology worked for us at scale. So I was like, okay, I have done that before. Why don't I bring that and kind of design it in a way that can be used in decentralized AI network? And that's where it started. So we experimented with it and the results of the experiment were really, really promising. So we got really excited and then we were like, okay, we found out how to make verifiable inference very fast. Why not just share it with the community because they can use it and the whole community can benefit from it together.
And that's why you just wrote the article, right? And so is there walk me through the process of like the tests that you were in and the results that you got and why that was so promising. I'm just curious, like, what about the results like told you, okay, we're going in the right direction?
So at that time, when we were writing the research, it was a few months ago. The best solution using zero knowledge to verify model output was done in a very small model. And if I remember correctly, it took almost 200 hours. So yes, and it's like very expensive, very slow, even if the model is very small. Then we developed this technology and we ran this technology on a model which had 13 billion parameters. So actually a really good model, which is usable for a lot of LLM tasks. And it took us 1 minute on a single GPU to do so. So compare that, like 200 hours versus 1 minute. And we're like, damn, this is the way to go. This is the one we need to use. And it's working. And it got a lot of adoption as well within the community. After we shared that research, it spread like wildfire.
Yeah, can you talk about that? What does that adoption look like?
So so we shared that research, and a lot of people within the community reached out to us, like especially people who are working in this, decentralized AI space. They reached out to me on Telegram. I was like, hey, this is interesting. Like, where did it come from? So I was like, yeah, this is what I was doing at Amazon, and I kind of wanted to bring that technology to the decentralized AI space. And we talked, and bunch of protocols, like really well-known AI, decentralized AI protocols now adopted this as the core part of the technology. So it's not just something they use as part of all the other things they do. This is something they use as one of the core innovations of the whole design space and protocol that they're building. So this sits at the heart. If we hadn't done that, all of these big protocols, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, they would still be stuck at an era where verifying an inference takes 100 or 200 hours.
Wow, that's a really amazing contribution to the ecosystem. What are the names of some of these companies? I'm just curious, like what the protocols are.
Yeah, so a couple of them were one is called Sentient. They're like a really great team, and it was co-founded by really big names within the community. And so what they do, I'm a fan of what they do, and they adopted this fingerprinting technology as a core part of their solution. So that's a big first of all, validation for us, and second, I'm just happy, like people who are very capable.
That's great.
Are adopting that. And the other one is also there's another one called Ritual. They're also really capable people. Like I've met the team before, and they also adopted this.
Who's the founder at Ritual? I can't. I'm trying to. I think I feel like I know them.
So the CTO is called. His name is Akhilesh, who I have met like over a call. And the CEO, his name is Niraj.
Niraj, yeah. Niraj has been on the show. I know Niraj. I know who he is. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So they're great people, talented people, and they saw the potential in the fundamental research that we did, and they basically adopted it as a core part of the technology. So I'm happy.
Well, I mean, the cool thing is too, I mean, so when they adopted it, was it just the research, or did you guys have some working code in a repo that they were able to use? Just curious.
We connected the blog post to some repos that wasn't built by us, but we brought those resources together for that.
Got it. Yeah, you stitch it together, and that's like, these are the components you use to like actually make it work, is a bunch of other open source stuff, which is the cool thing about open source, right? Like you're able to take all these ideas from other things and combine them and create new innovations, right? Like it's accelerating. That's the definition of acceleration right there.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Work off of each other's shared work. But again, like tying back to the idea of monetizing these contributions, what if all these people who are hopefully going to generate a lot of revenue using this technology, but they're using this technology off of open source work. So what if all the open source contributors were getting attributed some of the revenue that they were making? Right now, it doesn't happen, right?
Yep.
And
Well, I think this is where like token economics are just so game changing for open source software, right? And like Ethereum, I feel like, well, really Bitcoin and then Ethereum, right? They were the first ones to make this possible, right? Like Bitcoin caused a ton of coordination around open source software. And now it's for a multi-trillion-dollar asset class.
exactly.
And same thing with Ethereum, right? And Solana and all the others that are open source. And so I think like time and time again, we're seeing how token economics powers open source. And this monetizable open source AI piece, though, is the place like where it's one of the places, like last places where that dot hasn't been connected. I mean, it is being connected now by you guys. But I think like one thing, like if Niraj or somebody else like from, what was the other company you said their name was? Sentient. If y'all are listening to this, I highly recommend a token swap or something with Bagel, because the thing is like you're all fighting the same battle, right? And you're all building open source software. And I just think the token swap aligns incentives. Like somebody's going to be better than the other one maybe or whatever. Like, but you're not really competitors. Like in my world, there is no competition. There's just open source software development. And it gets aligned by tokens. Like that's how to me, the token economics are how you align those incentives. And where there isn't, like you guys are building automation into monetizing open source AI from a training perspective, right? Like training, that's the sort of tip of the spear for you. The kind of innovation that you did with the inference piece, there's not really like an on-chain way for you to like structure that relationship economically with these other teams. But for me, like even my company, we work with a lot of people who you could see would be our competitors, especially with where ABK Labs is going. And I have strategically given them tokens or found ways to have them become investors in our company. And they, in some cases, they're already customers. And I don't know, that just makes it better. That just aligns the incentives and makes sure everybody's winning. You're just all going to win. And at the end of the day, these systems all should be open source and compose with each other. Like, I don't know. I think one thing that's kind of crazy about crypto and bad about crypto or like the blockchain space is like the tribalism that you see happening. And there's this like narrative on crypto Twitter, like the Solana versus ETH thing is like a really good comparison. Like, dude, I don't know a single person on Solana who doesn't like ETH or respect Ethereum. Like everybody does. There's this like idea that we hate each other somehow. But this is like people yelling at each other on Twitter. So
Trying to get it.
I'm kind of rambling at this point, but you get where I'm going.
No, definitely. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's as I say, like whenever it comes to open source, it's always an infinite sum. That's the kind of tagline for some protocol called eigenlayers. So I'm kind of copying from them, right? Open source, right? But it's not zero sum at all. And if someone is working off of someone else's work, there should be a way to align the economic incentives as well. And that's where cryptography and cryptocurrency comes in. Like these are the technologies that kind of come together with the open source revolution and can kind of align the economic incentive part of it as well. And that's why I personally was like really attracted to this field and kind of trying to fuse that with the machine learning piece, open source AI piece right now. Like this is the solution. This is the only way we can solve the economic alignment while allowing everyone to work off of each other's shared work.
So can you, what do you think the future looks like now that you solve this verifiable inference problem, right? What does the future look like 2 years from now because of that? Where do you think it could go? I mean, we spent a lot of the early part of the show, like, with Bash on Mars, but like, what do you think is like, what can you even potentially predict of things that would be possible now because that exists?
Yeah, so I would like to practice some intellectual honesty right now, is that I wouldn't claim that we solved it because every technology has its trade-off.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone claims that their technology does not have any trade-off, is lying, like 100%. So I'd like to acknowledge that some of the trade-offs of this technology that we have built. And one of the biggest trade-off of this technology is that it's not deterministic. It's kind of like probabilistic, right? So other counterpart of this technology, which is very slow, but like we talked about like zero knowledge proofs, that happens to be deterministic. So I'm still looking at the teams who are working on this problem, and they can eventually make these zero knowledge proofs scalable in a way that can be used in production and it's not slow at all, right? So, okay, that was the intellectual honesty proof.
Well, can you break that down for me a little bit here? And this might be a stupid question, but for the people who don't have the knowledge are at my level, when you say probabilistic, you're like saying basically it's probable that this answer is correct. This thing is correct. Like we think it's correct versus deterministic is like, we know it's correct. Like 100% cryptographically prove it's correct.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, why that is, so I'll just give a really high level answer to that, but let me know if you want me to go deeper. But neural networks, like machine learning especially, is a lot of like determinism going on. So we don't really know as a contributors, like how these neural network works, right? Why they do what they do. We just know that if we train them in certain way, they get really better, really good at doing certain tasks. But we don't know why. We don't know what's happening inside, which is causing them to go become really great, right? That's why those are probabilistic. What the technology we used to do verifiable inference is that it's very machine learning based solution. That's why it's scalable, but at the same time, it's a machine learning based solution. That's why it's not deterministic. So that's the overall like high level answer. And why we're going with the future. So I just mentioned like verifiable inference a bunch of times, but that's not our core mission at Bagel. Our core mission is to make open source AI monetizable. And one of the requirements of doing that in a decentralized fashion, peer-to-peer fashion, was that we needed to solve this very specific use case of getting an inference which is verified, so that if someone else is working with me, they can prove that they're working on the exact model that we want them to work on, right?
Yep.
And we being able to do it in a scalable way just accelerated the timeline where open source AI is going to be really monetizable. And this
and deterministic is obviously like the ideal solution, right? But probabilistic, you find in engineering especially, you can kind of run into these roadblocks with engineering teams where they let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? So like I want to dig into the trade-offs a little bit more and like understand like how bad are we talking, right? Like if it's clearly good enough, you think you hypothesis it's good enough to build monetizable AI. And so
it's good enough to build monetizable AI. It's not good enough for someone to claim that it's like 100% correct. But for the specific use case of making more AI models monetizable, we don't need the 100%.
Yeah.
So whatever percentage we have been able to get is enough. And that's why this is being adopted industry-wide.
Yeah.
Everyone's adopting it. Like multiple parties have looked into this research and they're like, okay, this makes sense. So that's kind of like a peer review, almost what happens in like PhD.
Which is amazing validation for you. I mean, it really is. And the analogy that popped in my head is like, I think it was like REI or like LL Bean or somebody. They had this return policy that's like unlimited. You can return this product like 30 years from now, we'll give you a new one or we'll fix it, right? Like Patagonia is like that, right? But they're like with Patagonia, like their ethos, their understanding, like with their community of customers is like, hey, if you wore it out and it lived out its life, like come buy a new one or fix it yourself, right? Like pay for a repair. But they'll honor the agreement. Like you can literally walk in there and be like, I want a new one. But the rate of people who actually make those returns is like super low, and that guarantee causes the conversions to be super high, right? Like the number of people who buy that product to be super high. And in this case, this is kind of like a similar thing, right? Like the the amount of correct answers you get and the proof that it's actually correct, like it's inferring the right thing, that it's verified, is high enough that the rate of returns, the rate of failures or falsehoods or whatever is so low that like it doesn't matter. Like the economy can lose those dollars or whatever, and or have it be like, it's not like they lost it, but it's like poorly spent kind of. It's inefficient capital, but it's so little that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, true. Agreed. For the specific use case that we are working on, or the other companies who adopted it for, it doesn't really matter. There's some small use cases where it might matter. For example, if it's like some AI model which is doing some high frequency trading, for them, like determinism matters, right? So everything is about trade-off and use cases at the end of the day.
Got it. Okay, so like I want to talk a little bit about the developer community and how people can get involved if they want to contribute to Bagel at the stage that you're at. Like how can people get involved?
They can join our Discord, and there are a lot of discussions going on about what to build, what we're building, and how people can contribute. People can contribute to our research. People can contribute to our open source code. And we are actually about to open source some fundamental piece of research and code. It will take like few more weeks from now. It will be in few more weeks from now. But then people will be able to start contributing to that. And that's just the start. And we will figure out a way where we will have an economic incentive framework on top of that too, so that the open source developers are incentivized to contribute to the system.
Cool. And last question before we wrap, what are some areas of research that you're going to cover next year that we will be able to talk about on the show at some point?
I'm just thinking about like how much I can reveal, but there are a bunch of things that are like in flight and which are being
give us the alpha.
Big journals, right? Like we are kind of publishing a bunch of stuff in conferences, like in very respected machine learning conferences. But think about like we have one which is called PIE, PIE. So those are privacy preserving improvement. Okay, let me think about it. I actually forgot. Cut this out later. Okay. So yeah, one of them are called PIE. So PIE is like PIE. They're privacy preserving incremental enhancements. So you can actually do PIE on AI models where you can incrementally make them better or enhance them. But at the same time, all the enhancements that you made personally, you can own it. Like it can be privacy preserving. So you don't really need to reveal your secrets to other parties who you are collaborating with to add these enhancements on top of an AI model. So we call it the PIE, right? So that's one of the things I'm super excited about. We're going to reveal the research and code for the community, as we have always been doing. And I'm pretty confident that this will be adopted as much, if not more, by the rest of the community.
Well, I want to end with a call to action. My number one call to action just from the show is Ritual or Sentinel. I keep getting their name wrong.
Sentient. It's a huge project. Yeah, it's
Ritual and Sentient,
built by very well-known and respected people who I respect myself.
Yeah, well, I want to get them on the show. So I'm going to send the episode to Niraj for sure, because I know him. He's been on my show before, and you and I can BD getting the other team on, and we'll talk shop about AI, R&D, and like the future of the internet and artificial intelligence. And then for everybody else listening, if you're a developer out there, go to Bagel's Discord, check out their website, check out their research blog, get involved. It's early days. There's lots of things to do to contribute and to build the future where we can monetize open source AI. And Bidhan, thanks for another episode. This is great. And we'll see you on the next one.
Sounds great. Yeah. If anyone's interested in knowing what we're up to, just go to our Twitter. It's called Bagel Open AI.
Let's go. Awesome. Bagel Open AI. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.